Hello, everybody. Here we are again. Welcome once more to the Running Tales podcast. We are part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, brought to you by Run, Bike, Try magazine. And basically, our ethos is to tell the amazing stories of everyday runners out there, all from 5K up to ultra marathoners and everything in between. Now, we broadcast live, as you know, on Tuesdays at 6 o'clock now. We've moved from 5 till 6 o'clock British time. I don't know where that means you are, what time you're listening to it in the world, but hopefully you've managed to tune in and are listening now. These live shows go out across Run, Try, Bike social media pages, and we'll share them on our Running Tales social media pages too. So make sure you follow that. If you want a little list of all of that, go to our Substack page, runningtales.substack.com, and all of the various links you can get are there as well. And of course, this show will go out on our podcast, the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, where it will sit alongside amazing shows like the Farside Chats with Jason Bahamundi and Arm Gandhi, Food Fight Friday, Caffeinated Coaching, Joe Harden's Beyond the Finish Line, and so much more. We are growing this podcast network. We have got more and more of you lovely people listening to us. So if you are listening, please give us a positive rating and review. Help to continue to grow this and help us to continue to tell amazing running stories. Now, we have a really cool running story this week. It's a Dharmesh Mistry story. Now, Dharmesh is someone who is used to a bit of success as part of a career in technology for financial services. He's set up and sold 3 technology startups. He's the host of a podcast himself. He's written a journal on the subject, and he's acted as a consultant to boards on fintech. But don't worry, people, we're not going to be talking about finance today because I am not that clever. But as he reached 40, Dharmesh's health was not mirroring his business success, and weighing in at almost 15 stone, despite only being 5'8" tall, he was forced to confront medical issues similar to those which had sadly seen his own father die at just 53 years old. Dharmesh has completely revolutionized his life since then. He is an ultra runner who has taken on some of the hardest events across the world, and an awful lot of them too. So look, folks, let's bring Dharmesh forward now. Let's have a chat, and let's find out a little bit more about Dharmesh's story. So Dharmesh, I'm sorry, I know you like talking about banking as well, but I'm too stupid for that, we've decided. And let's talk about ultra running. I touched on it a little bit then, but how did you first get into the sport of running, I suppose, and then ultimately ultra running?
Well, with running, look, I've never been a runner, and it never really interested me. But I guess I went to the doctors. He basically said, "Oh, you're pre-diabetes, quite high blood pressure, yada yada yada." At that point, I was almost 15 stone. I had a waist size of 38 inches, and I did smoke and I did drink quite a bit. And I enjoyed, just watching football and drinking, quite frankly. Um, it was a cool lifestyle, but it wasn't a good lifestyle. And what kind of resonated with me was a realization that, look, if I carry on, what's going to happen to my kid is what happened to me was my dad died early, wasn't at my wedding. Wedding day was, it was a fantastic day for me, but I really missed not having my dad there. And I kind of thought, look, I need to get into a shape, get fit, just so that I can be at my kids' weddings. And it started off literally about, can I run round the block of our street first? Without stopping. The answer was no. I literally got to the top of the road and stopped. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work out, but you just put on your shoes and you try again and you try again, and one block became two, and then two became four, etc. That's how it started out, really.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess two quick questions off the back of that come to mind straight away. I mean, first of all, what made you choose running rather than, I don't know, going to the gym, walking a lot more, swimming, any other sport really? And secondly, I mean, what kept you at it? Because lots of people sadly get that kind of scary diagnosis from the doctor, and a lot of them find themselves a month later sitting on the sofa having a cigarette, smoking, drinking a beer, and watching the football, don't they? They don't make that change.
Yeah, I mean, I think first thing was I started to see like results with running. And the reason why I chose running was I didn't need a lot of equipment. At the time, I said it wasn't going to be very expensive because you just need a pair of, shorts, t-shirt, and some trainers, all of which I had, right? So it was a no-brainer. But since then, it's got a little bit more expensive. We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
And So that was the reason why it was running. But what I got out of it was like almost not immediate, but like I felt good after running, and especially like if I come back and the day before I could do one block and then suddenly I was doing two blocks, like wow, this is a massive thing, right? And then went from two literally to four, right, by the end of the week, and I'm like, whoa, this is really coming good, right? So there was a bit of self gratification in effect. Um, Now, when I got into longer distances, the benefits have been much bigger and wider. What I would say is that I've been very good, I guess, at the discipline of running and then losing weight and getting fitter. But what I found was, without intending to, my mental health was really good. Like I was able to, like juggle things in, day to day. You have loads of things that go on in life. You got your work, you got your family, you got the house chores, you got everything that needs to be juggled. And I was doing that in my head, and quite often I'd get quite stressed. And it was probably one of the reasons why I kind of drank a little bit, right? Was just to ease off. But I found it was like a lot better for me to ease off in running. And I found also, quite surprisingly, that the time to myself to think allowed me to unravel the mess that was in my head. Unraveling the mess in my head allowed me to feel good about my body and everything else around it. So it just had this like multiplying effect of goodness, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I just went on from one thing to the next. I guess I didn't intend to do like long distances at all. I got started because my brother, who at the time, 9 years younger than me, was fitter than me. Him and my cousin said, "Oh, we're going to enter a 5K," and I'm like, "5K? Whoa! I'm going to need to train for that." And I remember going on a training run with them, and we left London Bridge, and before we got to the next bridge, they were like 400 meters ahead of me having a chat, and I was huffing and puffing, thinking, "Geez, this is hard, right?" Um, but came to the 5K, and my brother got an injury, and so I had to run the race anyway. Ran it, finished it. It was just over an hour, and I'm thinking, "Oh, you know, um, this is not fantastic time," but I got it done, right? And then, he entered a 10K, and then again he got injured, and I ran it again myself. We did run the Reading half together,
Yeah.
um, and then I got into the London, and the London I thought, this I don't know if I can do, because this is like a full-on marathon. Even with like I was running by then like 5 days a week, right?
Mm.
But I didn't think I could do the London. And a while ago, I could remember a guy I grew up with. This guy was like massive. He was over 20 stone, right? And he wanted to run the London Marathon. And I trained a little bit with him at that time when I was about 16 or so, right? But I just remember like seeing this guy have a go at the London and only quitting at about mile 20 because the rubbing on his legs caused a significant bleeding. And he stopped
Right.
because of the bleeding, not because he couldn't do the rest, right? And I just stuck in my head that, look, if he could have a bash at it, I certainly can, because I was in much better shape by then, right?
Mm.
So and then doing the London was just amazing. I mean, the crowd and everything, the atmosphere just gives you a right old buzz.
Yeah. So it sounds like from that, obviously London went successfully, and I'm guessing by then, you've mentioned the sort of mental health benefits, but I'm assuming there's plenty of physical benefits, and you're just feeling a lot healthier and a lot better in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, by then I'm down to 12 stone. Um, you know, I got to a rut where I couldn't get beyond. like 12 stone. I couldn't go lower than that. And we'll maybe come back to it later, but there was an
Yeah.
answer to that, which wasn't actually running. Um, but yeah, I mean, I certainly, I shed loads of weight. I was running a decent-ish pace. I came in at 4:10. I was hoping for a sub 4 as everyone does. My
Yeah.
goal in running was never to beat a time or have a time. My goal was always to finish something, right?
Yeah.
But by then, even then, I'm like, maybe a sub 4, that would be really good to, you know, talk about in the pub when I go, whenever I do go then.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to be the first time, but I was glad that I got it done.
Hmm. And you've mentioned the P word there, the pub again, and I wanted to mention that because it is kind of integral in you getting into ultra running. It was a conversation in the pub, which I think prompted you and your friend Tarn, who we had on. People, regular listeners will have heard his story. That prompted the pair of you to start running sillier and longer distances.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, my goal was never to run anything more than maybe a marathon, right? And even at that point, I wasn't really thinking about anything else. But I was so proud, so proud. I'd done the London Marathon, and Tyne again is about 8 years younger than me. I'd met him. We'd worked together for a while, and then he, um, he. Sorry, my battery was running. So yeah, I did. Sorry. So he just called me up and said, "Look, let's meet up. Let's go and have a drink and catch up." So we caught up in the pub, and as we started to talk about stuff, you know, um, he mentioned that he'd done the London. I said, "Well, I've just done it too," you know, and then I worked out he got a faster time than me. And then foolishly, I was on, that morning I'd been on the train and I'd read the Metro and I saw this thing about London to Brighton, right? And I'm like, that's not even a bike ride. That's actually a run. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So I said for a joke, I'm doing the London to Brighton. And he's like, wow, on the bike. And I'm like, no, 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 I'm running it. And he said, wow, how far is that? I'm like, 50 miles, mate, 50 miles. And anyway, he said nothing of it. He said nothing of it. And I actually, quite frankly, just forgot about it until 3 days later. I got a text message from him saying, I spoke to Nicola. She thinks it's crazy, but I've got permission and I'm joining you on the run. I've entered. And I'm like, oh, sugar, I haven't even entered. Uh, then I had to go back to my wife and tell her that Tarn's entered, therefore I must. And she's like, no, you could just tell him you've been a complete idiot. You've been, showing off, and now it's caught up on you. You just about walked home from the London. What makes you think you can do too? And I'm like, well, I don't care. He's entered. He hasn't done more than 26. I'll be darned if I'm backing out, right? So I entered, and yeah, we ended up doing the race itself, and it was quite funny because like we were in pain. We hadn't, well, I didn't know about electrolytes too much, or eating on the run. We literally just ran more or increased our training to prep for this. And I remember towards the end, like we were in a lot of pain going up Black Cat, hill, and coming out, and I'm like, we're almost there, like 10 miles to go. We've got to get it done. I was surprised that I got to 40. Anyway, we're like on our last bit, and we run ahead of this guy. And all along the way, Tarn's really good at navigating, and he's been shouting out to people when they went the wrong distance or wrong route.
Yeah.
Anyway, we ran past this guy. He didn't say a thing, and about I think just under half a mile later, like we realized we're off course. So we ran back, and eventually we could see this guy in the distance, but there's less than a mile to go, right? And Tarn's going, you know what we've got to do, Dharm, don't you? And I'm like, don't tell me we're going to try and overtake that guy. I can literally just about move my legs. And he said, Dharm, we've got to. He let us go the wrong way. We can't let him finish ahead of us. So anything about Tarn, you know you're competitive. But anyway,
What
we did go past this guy and we did finish.
what I love about both that story you just told and the story of the pub is just the accidental and deliberate peer pressure within it, and the fact that, having spoken to Tarn, he completely blames you for the London to Brighton for doing it, and saying that you basically told him you were doing it, and he ended up doing it because he felt he couldn't let you do it without him doing it, and you literally say the same, and you kind of tricked each other into doing this thing, which has come to kind of define so much of what you've done since.
And you know what I forgot about is that, and this is like will resonate with so many other runners, is that the day after I couldn't actually get out of my bed, right?
Yeah,
And for 3 days I couldn't walk properly at all. So I literally was kind of in and out of my bed as much as I could do, right? And I remember calling Tan on the Monday, thinking, Tan, can you walk? No, it hurts. It hurts me too. We're never going to do this again. And then by the end of the week, we're looking at other races.
yeah, and then
So yeah.
I want to get into some of the crazy races you've gone on and done, and what some of your favourite have been. But just quickly before we do that, I kind of, going from where you were to having completed this ultra, and we sort of laugh and joke about it, we make it almost sound like it's a very easy thing, but I'm guessing there were sort of hurdles and trials and tribulations along the way, because what I don't want anybody else who's starting out now to think is that this is an easy journey. It comes with you know pitfalls and trials, and that's what makes it so great when you do finish.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I still remember the pain afterwards. I literally couldn't. I mean, luckily we had a mate that Chris O'Brien, who also ran with us, right? Lived in Brighton, let us come back to his house to have a shower, and I remember having to use my hands to lift my leg over his bath to try and have a shower afterwards. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's
pain is
incredible.
real.
The things we do for enjoyment and for fun. I know you've done races which have involved running for multiple days. I know you've done the Marathon des Sables, and you've done plenty of other sort of 100Ks and 100 milers as well. What races would you pick out as your favourite along the way?
I think like the Marathon des Sables was just an amazing experience.
Yeah,
And I have to give credit to a good friend of mine, Jason Watkins, who's been a total inspiration to me. He rang me up one day and just said, Dom, I've just run 6 marathons, 6 days in the desert, and I survived on cashews. Um, and I'm like, yeah. I didn't believe him. I had to look it up on the internet and like, wow, he's actually done it. And that was the trigger for me. But obviously, Tyler and myself, we did our homework and we prepped like massively for the MDS. So when we actually came to do it, um, it wasn't easy, but we were ready to get it done. And I think there was some doubt whether I could do it, but during the run and getting days done, we just felt more and more confident that this was going to be very doable. But the experience of MDS was amazing. Just um, the song in the morning was happy. Blaring out the speakers, helicopters flying over, hundreds of other runners there. It was 45 degrees heat. You just
yeah,
can't believe that you're there. It's like, you know, it was a bit like being in a dream. But some of the sights, the dunes, the empty villages running through, dried up riverbeds, the climbs up, mountains. The time when, I'm thinking we're almost home. One night on the double day, and we just ran. And I said, it looks like we've got like half an hour to go, but because of the dunes, you just
Mm.
don't know the distance, and you're just going up and down and up and down. And I'm like, Tom, this the light doesn't seem to get any nearer. We've been running for 2 hours. It was just crazy. So many wonderful experiences there. Mostly, which is true of all of the ultras, is that you end up making some amazing friends along the
Yeah,
way. And the journey is not just the physical thing, what you get through it, how you feel about having done it, but it's also about the people that you meet and the stories that you hear from them. And our tent was crazy, and it was yeah, it was full of fantastic people. Yeah. So I think that was probably one of them. The other one, which we did in November more recently, was Nepal, similar format to MDS. The reason I loved that was because it was like the first time ever it had been done.
yeah.
Nobody really quite knew what it was going to be like. I found out that Simon Hollis hadn't actually got anyone to run it before, so it was a complete virgin run. And to me, that was the icing on the cake. This is something that nobody else has ever done, right? And that's why it was great. And then obviously, like you meet Emily and Owen and Michael, all of the runners on the day. Russell joined us, Tan was there, Helen was there. It was great because even though there was a bit of competitiveness going on, everyone was there for each other as well.
Yeah, it strikes me that when you're talking about these events, what you talk about is, obviously they are in some format races, but what they are more than anything else is their adventures. They're getting out there in the world and seeing amazing things and meeting amazing people while also being able to get a little bit fitter.
Yes. Yeah, look, I listened to Tan's podcast the other day, and he talked about the amazing scenery and how beautiful it was in the mountain, and all of that is kind of true,
Yeah,
but it also is so painful. It hurts.
yeah,
And most of the time, you're thinking about other things so that you don't have to think about the pain, right? So it is that, but when you look back on it, you kind of remember the things, like you see a glacier in the middle of nowhere, and like I have a memory of running through like a rapeseed field. Like, rapeseed is the yellow fields,
yeah,
and this
yeah.
stuff I always thought like came up to your waist. It comes up to your head, and you run through this field, and you think, oh, this is beautiful, and then you suddenly realize there's zillions of bees. So, so you run a little bit quicker, so make sure that you don't get stung as well. But it does look and feel beautiful, right?
Mm.
As Tan said. But at the same time, there's pain and endurance that has to go through.
Yeah, because there's a reason, presumably, why you do these races rather than simply, your local 5, your local 10Ks, even the I don't know, the half marathons, the prestigious half marathons that we have, like the Great North Run or something like that. There are plenty of people who are perfectly satisfied with sticking at those rather than heading halfway around the world to run through the sand or a swarm of bees.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, like I said, whatever race I'm running for myself,
Yeah,
because let's say, I trained really hard and I won the Reading half. I still, that would be the Reading half, right? It wouldn't be, the UK world record. It wouldn't be the world record. Some guy somewhere is always going to be running faster than you.
yeah,
So it's a never-ending kind of goal to be, to win or to be on the podium in effect, right? Because even if you get to one, you're not going to get on to another one, maybe, right? Because somebody out there is always better. So for me, it's always really about the experience. I set myself some little goals to create the challenge. So, with the shorter distances, yeah, I want to run like with the London, I wanted to do the sub 4, did the sub 4, wanted to do a 3:30, did the 3:30, and I didn't want to do more than that. I kind of knew my limit as to
mm,
how hard I wanted to chase a particular goal, because there's so much more to do. You can't be doing competitive marathons and doing ultras at the same time. I think the training is too much and too hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I think you have had a couple of successes along the way that I want to ask you about. One podium finish, which is a big serious thing, and we'll talk about that. But you also like to tell people that you are a absolute winner in one particular category. Do you want to tell people about that?
I am. I've won many races as the fastest Ugandan over 55 years old.
That's a very important category, Dom.
It's absolutely. We know that Africans are some of the best runners in the world, and
Yeah.
there are a few ultras that I can pretty sure that I was the fastest Ugandan over 55. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fantastic achievement. But there was a genuine podium finish as well.
Yeah, well, so in the year for MDS, we actually ran 2,000 miles, Tyne and I. And we're doing maybe a couple of marathons a month. And, some of those are in training, some
Mm.
of them are like events. And so literally we are scouting for events that we like the sound of and we could do, right? And one of them happened to be what was advertised. Literally, I saw it said, "Oh, it's a night marathon, Matan. It's in London. That will make it a lot easier for us to do because some of the other ones you have to travel and book hotels, etc." So I literally just saw marathon, London, and the time, and
Yeah,
we both entered. And we actually took our MDS packs. It was part of our training. When we got there, it was busy, but it didn't look like there were any runners there. And I'm like, we got to the right place. We got to the right place. It looked like we were the only runners. And then I picked up a flyer and I read it, and it said it was the Shine uh, marathon. It was a walk, an overnight walk. And they also had a half marathon event as well, but also a walk. So we started a lineup and then we walked out. And bearing in mind, like an hour or so before that, the half marathon walk had already started. And so we'd seen people go, and then our one started. We thought, well, let's give it, a few hundred meters. Then we started to run. People started to shout at us and saying, "It's not a run. You
oh.
can't run this." So we pulled over about half a mile later, and we went to the other side of the road, went into a pub. We took our numbers off, and then we carried on running, and as much as we could, parallel but on the other side, and we
Right.
was just overtaking people. We were overtaking even with our packs, which weighed
Yeah.
10 kg, right? We were overtaking people, and nobody blinked an eye. We ran through the night, and then as we came to the finish, we'd seen nobody, right? And I said to Tan, "Look, let's just get in the car. We don't need to cross the finishing line. We know we've done it." And Tom
Yeah.
said, "When I left this morning, I promised my son that I won't come home unless I come first or second. We're going to cross this line." Anyway, so we come into the Battersea power station where the finish was, and some guy leaps off his chair, starts switching on lights. We can hear him turn on the mic, and he shouts, "Welcome to our two runners in positions 1 and 2. Well done." so, so, so that was a race that we won, and we never quibble over who came first or second.
Oh,
But
well, I
that
was
was
going to
our
say,
first podium for the marathon.
you didn't sprint for the line to see who could make it over first.
No, no. I mean, we had a genuine kind of like top 20 finish in London to Brighton event,
Yeah.
and we know it was like 19 and 20, but we never quibble about who was first. We kind of always try to aim to run it together at the finish.
Yeah. Obviously, that was a bit of an unusual event, but we've touched on some of the other different ones you've done and the different sizes of them. From MDS is hugely popular, obviously across the whole world. The London Marathon is always tons of runners. Then you have the race in Nepal, capital to country, where I think there were 7 of you. Do you have a preference on kind of the size of races that you enter and the number of participants?
I mean, personally, if I don't run many without, some of my friends being there, right?
Yeah,
But if I'm gonna do anything long, I'm very reliant on good navigation and somebody that can read a map,
yeah,
like Tarn or Helen or Russell, because I can't read maps. So I don't really have a preference, but I do like the Centurion series because they're really well laid out and
mm.
they're typically on routes where you typically can't get lost. So, you have enough to worry about on a 100-mile race, let alone navigation as well.
Yeah. The
So,
navigation
yeah,
thing's always worried me. Well, I've never done that many. When I have done longer ones, it's been um, loops in the main, laps, uh, because I'd be worried about getting completely lost.
yeah, and I mean, to be fair, we have been lost on a 100-miler, and we ended up doing an extra 3 miles, and it's painful. It's
Yeah.
like the 3 miles that you regret all the way to the finish. It's so horrible.
Yeah, well, when you
Yeah,
realise that you've gone the wrong way, and then you have to retrack your steps that half a mile, 2 miles, or whatever, and you're like, "This is all extra mileage that I could really do without."
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So on that kind of subject, how safe have you found running along the way? You talked about the pain of it. You've talked about getting lost every now and again. I mean, is running safe?
Running is safe normally in an event if you take good care of yourself, etc. I mean, there's been some times I had a couple of goes at UTMB where in the middle of the night and you're climbing up with your hands and and poles and big rocks and things that it looks a bit precarious. But
Yeah,
um, I guess I did do a recce with Tarn before our first UTMB event, and he managed to kind of borrow a chalet from an ex-boss of his, and we planned to go out and run a couple of days in the mountains. And the first day we set out with our full kit, etc. And um, it started off nice. It was nice and sunny as we got up the mountain. We did our first climb. It started to rain. And when I say rain, we can see we're coming up the side of this mountain. We can see lightning striking trees. Like we can see it, like,
yeah,
a few hundred meters from us. And at this point, I don't have carbon poles. I have aluminium ones. And I'm
yeah,
thinking, this is not a good thing. So that was one of the scary moments on that trip, thinking that we're going to get electrocuted. But literally after we kind of pulled into a chalet for a second, and for the rain to stop, we carried on running. And another fear of mine is kind of cattle, and you don't expect cattle in the middle of a mountain, and there
no,
is one narrow exit, and there's about 50 big cows, right, all blocking the end exit. And I'm like, Tom, I'm not going through that. He said, Dom, we've got to go through that because we can't retrench on our route. I'm like, I don't want to go through that. I can't. I'm it's a fear of mine, right? And so Tom opens up his arms and starts clapping and shouting, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, you're really going to make them angry. And anyway, but they didn't. They actually started to part away. They started to
wow,
move away. But, oh, right, we're not going to get trampled to death. So that's okay.
yeah,
Um, then we kind of come down the side of this mountain and we're going along a route, and we get to a bit which is which, to be honest, I said to Tan, like, this isn't the right route. I've seen some old people go through the trees there. That must be the route. And he said, no, this is what it says on my GPS. So we go up this kind of like a shallow slope, and it gets steeper and it gets steeper. But as it gets steeper, there's less and less stones. It becomes more and more sandy. And we get up and we're almost like 50, 60 meters up, right? and I grab a rock, um, and it comes away in my hand. And I shout, Tarn's below me, and I'm like, shout to Tarn, Tarn, rock! He looks up, and this rock just brushes his shoulder, right? And Tarn now is sliding down this slope, right? And I say slope, it's the side of a mountain almost, right? And he ends up where we started, and I'm stuck in the middle. I'm like, what do I do? I'm not sliding down.
No.
So because there were no more rocks, that you could grip, I'm digging the poles into the side of this sand and pulling my way up. I had like 10, 15 meters to go. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have to do it, it's really hard on your hands. Anyway, I got out at the top, and we kind of carried on this trail, and I'm cursing him for what I had to go through. And
Yeah.
and then he just says stop, and I'm like, what, dude? And we're going through this forest, and he said, do you hear that? I'm like, yeah, there's a thud. And literally 10 meters in front of him, a boulder like the size of, like, I don't know, it must have been at least a meter wide, right? A massive boulder thuds down, doo, 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 taking out trees as it goes, right? And I'm like, that could have been us. If you hadn't said stop, that was
Yeah.
one of us, wiped out. Anyway, that point we said, let's just try and get home in one piece now. We got back, we had a beer, and I said, I'm not running tomorrow, it's too dangerous.
But that's the insane. I mean, obviously that's a pretty extreme run. But when you look at it, and
It wasn't meant to be.
when you start out running, or a lot of people listening to this may just be, I say just, that's really unfair, but they might do part run, and the scariest thing they have to face is someone warning them about not putting their dog properly on the lead or whatever. And some people might do halves, and then they hear about running. And running is not supposed to be mountain climbing and dodging boulders like Indiana Jones and all that sort of thing. It is a kind of crazy part of the sport of running, isn't it? The ultra scene.
Yeah, and I think so. I think once you kind of get to a certain point, those are the things that keep you going. It's like, wow, what an amazing experience. We survived that. What
Yeah,
else can we do?
yeah. Yeah. Have you had any sort of major aside from dodging boulders, any sort of major mishaps that have happened in any of these big runs where you thought, oh my word, that equipment, I don't know, equipment failure, nutritional failure, anything that you think could cost you a race along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely haven't worked out the fine art of like my nutrition and my hydration. Like I'm I used to suffer from cramps, so I started taking more salt. That seemed to fix the cramp, but now I've had stomach issues. I've run some race, like the max I think I can do on an empty stomach was about 25, 30 miles, but I'm literally, I've retched everything out of my stomach. You can only taste the bile in your mouth. And,
Mm.
I finished a run off that. Um, there's been a time when, accidentally in the morning, I had a bit of a ache in my back, and foolishly I took some ibuprofen, went off to do a 100 miler Centurion, and I stopped to have a wee, and it was bright red, and it scared the life out of me. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't, you know, I typically have beetroot the night before, but I didn't this time, so I knew it wasn't that, you know, and it scared me. So I got to a checkpoint, and they said, well, now that you've told us, you're going to have to go back to base. But yeah, I mean, there's been, it's all stuff typically, I should have known better in most scenarios, because, we've read so much by now, we've looked into so much that we kind of knew these things, but, a bit of complacency sometimes sits in, and then, suddenly, you forgot to pack something that you were meant to, because, you're just in your normal routine. Yeah, there's my mandatory kit, there's the food that I normally take, and then suddenly, ooh, where was the spare pack of salt? Now I've dropped a packet of salts. It's like, now I've got nothing to lean back. It's stuff like that. You know,
Yeah. Is having to get past all those errors or those coincidences that happen when you're out on those strange things that might happen, like it's suddenly raining or it being 30 degrees when you didn't expect it to be. Is getting over those another sort of major reason why you do these races, and how much sort of more resilient does that make you, I suppose, in everyday life?
yeah. I mean, I think it works in both in the positive. Well, I think it generally works in a positive way. I can't
Yeah.
think really of a negative, right? In that, we done a race like this is another coincidental thing, right? But I heard about this run called the Run for the 96, and there's a Liverpool fan. Like, wow, I need like, I couldn't find any contact details for these guys that had done it, right? And so a guy starts at work, right? It's sort of 4,000 man company. One person starts, happens to be in my office. Da da da. He said, "Oh, I see you're a Liverpool fan." Yeah, yeah, I'm a Liverpool fan. Da, da, da. He said, "Oh, there's a medal there." I goes, "Yeah, that was my MDS medal." Da da da. Going to. He said, "Oh, you run?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I do loads. I'd love to run, do the Run for 96 at some point, but I can't find anyone for it." Right? We got into football, and he was a Liverpool fan. He said, "Oh, I happen to be one of the guys that support that run." And I'm
Oh
like,
wow.
"Oh," sort of like, "So do you think I can run?" Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you know me, yes, of course. So we got into that, and I remember doing that one time, and it starts off with a bit of ceremony for the people that passed away at the
Mm.
stadium, right? So it's very emotional to start off with, and we're running with people that have lost people, right? So you hear the stories along the way, and it absolutely chucked down with rain. I had a raincoat, but within half an hour it just was drenched. We stopped at a point near Tesco's, and I wringed out my clothes, etc. I'd gone through all my spare stuff, and I'm thinking this isn't fun. But then you kind of remember why you were doing it, and you kind
Yeah.
of think, I need just like to switch off and just get on with it and get it done, right? And then you see everyone else is doing exactly the same thing. You don't want to be the guy that kind of quits because of a bit of water, right? Is that what I convinced myself to keep myself going, because it was absolutely miserable to run the night, in such heavy rain. But so yeah, I mean, some things don't go to plan. I know another race where we ran it. It was the first time this ultra being run from Windsor down to some place in London, and it was 100 miler. They totally messed up our drop-off bags. And they had very little food at the checkpoints. We got to our first checkpoint expecting our drop-off bag, no food for us. Just a few jelly babies and some crisps, etc., but nothing nutritional. And it was like, well, and then the second checkpoint, drop bag that we meant to have, we got our first bag, which was lighter because we were expecting the second one to have most of our food, right? So
Mm.
we planned it all out, and things don't go to plan, and it kind of destroyed us because we didn't have what we should have had in our body. We ran through the night again, all in rain, but by the time morning came, we still got like 20 to go, and we're out of fuel because we just didn't have enough in us. So yeah,
Mm.
I mean, things are always going to go wrong at some point. You try and cater best you can. Sometimes you can grit it through, and sometimes you just got to say to yourself, like, what's the risk that I'm taking? Like, when I was peeing blood, I felt possibly I could do another 20, you
Yeah.
know but was it safe to do it? No, I'm not going to take that chance.
Mm. Yeah, and how does that sort of translate? I mean, you hinted at some of this earlier when you were talking about starting running and it creating more clarity in your head and so on. But I'm just thinking about how overcoming these challenges that come up, and B, realizing when to stop when things become too much. How do those two things translate into your everyday life, and do they kind of help you to react to tricky situations in that everyday life?
I always think that there is, you always set yourself a limit and you kind of think, this is enough for me, right? But actually, the bit about your head, it's like, I would say 90%, I've had quite a few DNFs, right? And I would say 90% of my DNFs was my head giving up well before my body, right? And what I have learned through the runs is that, my body is capable, well capable of things that I just never imagined. I never imagined I could do 50. I never imagined I could do 100. I never imagined I could do the MDS. All of those things happen. I never imagined, chucking up everything and having nothing. I could still do another 20. So typically it's your head, that will give up, well before your body. But also, the benefit of some of this stuff, as I said, it gives you so much clarity. It gives you time to yourself and time to think, time to kind of really unravel stuff, right? For me personally, what I realized was I'm juggling too much. I'm juggling my work and my hobbies and my family life and my friends and so many other things that, the running was almost like a break, like running 25 at the weekend and then doing a 15 afterwards was just time to myself to clear my head and
Yeah.
make me feel good. Like I'd wake up on a Monday thinking, I've just done 40 miles this weekend, I feel great.
Hmm. And along the way, I know you've met a lot of good running friends, some of whom have become a bit of an inspiration to you in within their own running and what they do, and some of whom, and these might be the same people, some of whom just call you Kermit. Tell me about Kermit.
Kermit is because I lost my sun hat at MDS, right? Like if that's a critical piece of equipment. So I
Yeah,
had to use my buff, which was bright green,
yeah,
as my hat. And so most runs I've worn this buff on my head. And so, the name Kermit was born. But
yeah,
like other inspirations, like the women that do 100 milers are total inspirations to me. Like, we men think we're hard because we've done 100 and we've done the MDF, da, da, da. Yeah, but and we juggle our work life and everything else, all the things that I said. Yeah,
mm,
but we didn't also bring up a family, young kids. Emily, who ran with us at the Nepal. Helen, who ran also at Nepal. Both of them total inspirations because they were doing all the stuff that women have to do, right? Personal stuff as well as the family stuff. Yet they were finding time to get the training done, whether that's running first thing in the morning, to work and then running back from work, whether it's just finding a babysitter and running 25 at the weekend, just to get things done. That's inspiration for me. I mean, um, there was also a lady that in the tent next to us in MDS. She had the whole of the bottom of her foot peeled off as a
right,
blister, right? And that was the end of day 2, and she carried on and finished MDS. I mean, if that isn't grit, I don't know what is.
yeah,
So I just find like a lot of my inspirations come from those kind of women, Emily and Helen especially. Um, Louise Victoria Thompson, she's the running mum. She's just done unbelievable runs on Centurion. She's done like them all of the hundreds, all of the 50s. She's done the 100 slam, the 50 slam. And you look at, she's like a tiny woman, but she's just got grit and she just gets the job done.
yeah,
Total inspirations. And then I guess, like Russell has become an inspiration because he watched us at the first MDS not being a runner and then basically became a runner because he saw us attempting the UTMB and then subsequently finishes the arc of attrition with Tarn. And then, last year, despite being spent and being on the phone to us, we were crewing for him and so on. I DNF'd on that one, and I was listening to him on the phone. It's like I can't do it. I can't do it. His mum was on the phone. She said, just go as far as you can, and he finishes it, and
Yeah.
that's just total inspiration. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
I find inspiration in everyone's stories.
Mm,
And that's one of the things that I do enjoy about the runs is like I've enjoyed Nepal. I spent a bit of time with every runner, and then a bit of time on my own as well. By just hearing the stories that other people have, just
yeah.
inspires me.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think presumably they're the sort of stories which hopefully can inspire people who were back where you were a few years ago, back where we started this podcast, potentially looking at serious health conditions, and running can help people in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the other reasons why I do run and carry on with some of this stuff is because I found that me doing it and talking about it to a few people, I'm not showing off, but
Mm,
just talking about the experience has inspired other people to start running and to do
yeah,
things that they simply did not think they could do. A good friend of mine I coached football with, a youth team, Chris Millard. He's a big guy, right? And his mum suffered from cancer, as did mine, and he always had this aspiration to run the Reading half.
yeah,
And I said, like, dude, we can do it. I'll train with you. He said, no, 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 but you'll be too quick. And I said, look, time on feet is any time on feet is good time for me. If I need to do a few more miles, if I need to spend more time, I'll do it after we've run together, right?
mm,
And um, I ran with him through the Reading half, and I almost missed seeing his reaction at the finish because as I started to wave to my wife, and I've run all the way around the Reading half with him, he
yeah.
carries on sprinting, and I'm like, dude, I thought we were running this together. So his claim to fame is that he beat me on the first Reading half that he ran. But for him, I saw what it meant for
Mm,
him to look up, and I knew he was telling his mum that, look, mum, I've done the Reading half, and it just, I'm welling up just thinking about it. But stuff
yeah,
like that, I feel great about, people achieving things that they haven't been able to, that they thought wasn't possible, right?
yeah. And what I love about that is obviously it goes to show that, I mean, don't get me wrong, a half marathon is hard. In some ways, it's really hard because you kind of have to go all out when you're doing it. But I think what that goes to show is you don't have to run MDS or across Nepal or anything. You can do a 5K, you can do whatever you want, and if that's your thing that makes you feel like you've achieved and makes you feel better, that's the most important thing about running, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Margaret Ralston, who a few years ago, she's a mom, and she lost her son, quite a young chap, 17, 18 years old, to cancer, right? She wanted to run the Reading half. We did a fundraiser. Chris, the guy that ran the Reading first with me, he also wanted to do it, etc. We started off this race. She ran maybe a couple of miles and just said, I can't do this. And I said, you're going to do it. We're going to walk. We're going to be, the last ones through, but we're going to make this. Right. And James is going to be so proud of you. And just to see her put one step in front of the next and the next, and just to get round, it was, a good 4 or 5 hours to do a half marathon. And I could feel the pain in her feet. Right.
Yeah,
But to see her face when we finished and how much pride that she had that she'd done it for James, just, it was another testament to like why we do this stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely. Oh, well, that's just fantastic. And um, spending 4 or 5 hours on your feet, whatever the distance, my word, that is tough. That is not easy. I was listening to a podcast. It was about ultra racing actually the other day, but they were talking about the difference between the fast runners who are finishing it in whatever a super quick time is for the distance, and some of the good old back of the packers, and they were saying, my word, being that long on your feet, that's the hard bit. That's when it gets really tough.
That is the hard bit for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, definitely. Dom, one last question, because I promised my good friend Joe Harden, who does our Beyond the Finish Line podcast, and he also does the What's in Your Earbuds podcast on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. And I promised him I'd ask my guests this little question of because we have a playlist of What's on Your Earbuds songs, and it basically is what music, if any, hopefully some, that you might like to listen to when you're out running, and we'll add it to the network and the playlist.
Oh, I don't often listen to music. I tend to listen to podcasts more. So, I've been listening to a few of yours recently. I listened to Diary of a CEO. I listened to Joe
Yeah.
Rogan, etc., etc. And some of the, like I listen to some of the podcasts that we record while I'm running, because I just, like I say, running, you're going to spend that time. You might as well do something constructive at the same time. I find it a good distraction. But if I'm listening to music, I am partial to a bit of Ed Sheeran, and a lot of kind of like 70s, 80s soul music and R&B. I'm partial to a good bit of hip hop. Classic 80s hip hop. That gets me running good.
Good stuff. Well, Joe, if you're listening, when you listen to this, I'm sure Joe will be listening. What you got to do is you got to put a bit of Ed Sheeran on there, a little bit of hip hop, some soul, all for Dharmesh, but also add some of my podcasts in the middle of your music playlist, so people can listen to that. Dharmesh, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolutely fantastic chat. I love hearing your story, and I love the idea of all the dares and the peer pressure that just leads you to doing more and more of these crazy runs. I guess one final last question is, what's next?
Wow. So I'm actually going to be trekking in Peru, actually flying tomorrow. So I'll be doing the Inca Trail. Then I'm meant to be relaxing, but when I land on the 17th, which is a Tuesday, and then that Saturday, I've got the Centurion Chiltern Wonderland 50 to do. So I'm kind of hoping that my taper isn't too long and that I'm not drinking too many cocktails
Yeah,
at the end of my holiday. But who knows? Tan will find out, because he'll be the one that'll be dragging me along through this run next. But I'd also like to say, look, thank you for the opportunity to kind of tell my tale. And I do hope that, if there's anyone that's kind of borderline thinking about doing something amazing, just go and do it. You'll feel fantastic afterwards, right? Just do it.
definitely. Well, that's a fantastic message and a great way to finish. Good luck with your nice, relaxing 50 miler. I'm sure you'll absolutely smash it. And thank you again for joining us all today on the Running Tales podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Folks, if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a nice positive rating or review wherever you listen. Check out all the other shows on here. I mentioned Joe Hardin's brilliant Beyond the Finish Line. You can listen to the fireside chats with Jason and Orm. They're brilliant. If you want a bit of a laugh, I can always recommend Food Fight Friday as well. Fantastic stuff. Thanks again, Dom. And folks, I shall see you all again very soon for another Running Tale.